Assassin's Promise by Thomas Woodward, Chapter 130. Millie moved ahead, eyes forward. With Kayana at her side, she felt less vulnerable, but seeds of worry and doubt had sprouted in her mind over the last few hours. What was Gavis trying to hide? The sloping incline up to the great sprawling tent overlooked the rest of the encampment. Stout, armored guards stood silently at 3-foot intervals leading up to his tent. No less than 30 men stood within easy reach, should they be needed. Their eyes regarded her unblinkingly. Millie had not been the center of attention for much of her life, and she felt self-conscious under such scrutiny. Kayana rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Her touch was light, but solid. Millie realized that even Kayana could not protect her, should the guards be called down on them. She was supposed to be viewed highly in their eyes. Maybe it was just nerves. Still, she felt the dark stain of doubt linger in her thoughts. Gavis himself met them at the entrance, a look of shock coming over the faces of all the guards, immediately dipping to their knees, prostrating themselves. "Please, enter. You are a most welcome guest. You may bring the daughter of the leopard with you, if it pleases you." Millie wrinkled her forehead and confused, but Kayana answered before Millie could voice her questions. "None have called our people that for a very long time." Kayana's voice was hard, like coils tightening over cold steel. "This is not my home, and I do not wish to offend you, as we are your guests, but you have no right to speak those words." Kayana waited, muscles tensed, body rigid. "An oversight. Please excuse my carelessness. I have never met a savage before. You will have to forgive me." The barest hint of a mocking smile crossed Gavis's features before returning to their placid calm. Millie's blood went cold. Did he wish to bring down Kayana's fury? The moment held. Kayana went silent, shrugging her hands away from Millie. Even unarmed, she radiated danger. Gavis smiled and turned, as if enjoying a small joke only he was privy to. "Follow me, honored one. You will find refreshments to all your wants here. Your every desire will be seen to, as is your right." Millie felt her insides twist in apprehension, unsure if Kayana would act. But there was no reaction. She tried to turn to meet the other woman's gaze, but Kayana kept her gaze rigidly forward and kept 2 hand lengths of open space between her in all directions. Behind them, the guards rose to their feet, their armor clinking in unison. Clearly they had been trained to fight in formation. Their movements were too well timed. Millie shuddered, a feeling of claustrophobia starting at the edges of her mind. She remembered being trapped under the heavy wooden beam of the broken caravan, unable to move as killers had advanced upon her. She felt something akin to that now. A twin set of guards moved in lockstep to stand in front of the entrance to the tent, their backs facing in. Gavis reclined in a beautiful divan. A full set of gemstone-encrusted couches were cloistered in a pleasantly cool sitting area. The high ceiling of the tent rippled gently in the wind. Even here the elements lent their touch, however faint. Fine sweeping lengths of colored silk decorated the area above their heads. A small bronze brazier glittered on the distant end of the space from them, intense incense wafting lazily in great plumes of blue and red smoke. It dissipated within a few feet, leaving a pleasant smell. But Millie also felt caged, unable to see the outside air. Her mind screamed, but she muted it to a buzz desperately, not wanting to show weakness in front of the leader of the group of merchants. With one hand, the rotund man beckoned them forward. "Come, sit. As your host, it is my unique pleasure to see that you are seen to. Let us speak then. Yes, I can see you two wish to move past this charade and get to the heart of your question." Gavis's eyes held an unfiltered hunger, a dark greed in his beady eyes that buffeted Millie's senses. "You may approach, child, but I ask that your servant stay in the entryway." Turning to Kayana, Gavis spoke again. "Please help yourself to any food and drink you wish. What questions we speak of are for young Millie's ears only." Upon saying Millie's name, Kayana's mouth formed a line. Her eyes still silent, deadened. Without another word, Kayana simply stopped, standing rigidly in place. She could have been carved from marble for all the appearance of life she outwardly gave. "Yes, I see that I have underestimated you. I am glad that you see the need for this as well." Only the barest hint of emotion could be seen upon Gavis's face, but a twinkle in his eye gave his true intentions away. Millie had unconsciously stopped breathing, waiting for some reaction. When none came, the breath she sucked in sounded loud in her ears. Gathering herself, Millie cautiously ascended the small set of stairs that led to a raised platform. Like a miniature terrace, it obscured the view of what it held within. An entire forest of birds sat perched contentedly all over the light wooden structure. Passing through it, Millie felt the flapping of wings as a chorus beat around her like 1,000 heartbeats. Breaking through beyond, Millie saw a low pit at the center of the platform, with a short set of steps that would bring her down several feet to sit in private, surrounded by a living dome of flitting avians that would mute all sound from within. An intricately carved chair sat opposite Gavis's own in the private, but inviting circular disc at the bottom of the pitted area. A steaming cup of dark liquid sat on a platter that was leveled between the two chairs. A jade tea kettle of intricate make sat nestled next to the steaming cup. Gavis sipped from his own cup, holding one hand over it, keeping the heat trapped. His dark eyes regarded her as Millie stepped down into the lowered area, waiting for him to gesture before taking her seat. A long moment passed with neither of them speaking. Unsure what to do, Millie took the cup that sat on the platter and rose its brim to her lips. She could see Gavis watching her, gauging her. He looked like a cobra waiting to strike. Closing her eyes, Millie took a long swallow, the dark liquid so hot it burned the roof of her mouth. Determined not to be taken for a child, she fought off a yelp of pain and forced the rest of the liquid down. Not even the barest twitch of an eye. "Millie, you hold yourself as regally as a queen. Indeed, you could become one some day, I have little doubt. But why did you come to us? Why now, after all these long years? Did you know that only a handful remain that truly believe in our God?" Gavis's mouth turned down into a frown. "You have given proof to the non-believers. I must confess that I myself have had doubts over the past long years. But then you arrived on the wind. Like an innocent child, you stumbled upon us, wretched and ugly in our ways. As the conduit for Zaxxas, your words are his decree. Forgive me, great Lord." Abasing himself, Gavis scrabbled to the ground beneath Millie's feet. Shock and dismay flitted among her features. Millie wanted to stand, to retreat from the merchant leader. She felt as if he was speaking past her, only seeing her form as the physical representation of his god. Revulsion overtook her, and then an idea formed. "You will abase yourself in front of my companion, Kayana. You will beg for her forgiveness." Millie was terrified, feeling as though a crack could form in her mask at any point. She was not this person. She felt as if she was acting out a play. The feeling thrilled her, but it twisted her stomach, seeing the heavy-set man beneath her in thrall. "Yes, great Lord, it will be as you say. I do not question your choice of form on this plane. You are wise beyond our understanding. It is not for us to question antiquity." Immediately, Gavis stood, not bothering to wipe the dirt from his clothes. A look of tranquility had come over him, as if a great burden had been lifted. Millie could only follow, waiting to see what he would do. The birds screamed as they exited the carefully constructed dome. They sounded as if they were being murdered. The sound horrified Millie. Raising his arm, Gavis snapped his fingers, immediately alerting the 2 guards standing at the entrance to the great tent. "Zaxus has returned to us. Bring word to the others. Curse you! Move, you fools!" The guards hesitated, not prepared for this outburst. As he spoke, Gavis took out a glittering knife from his robe, slowly cutting down the lengths of his right hand. The blood welled from the tip, then dripped onto the lavish silks beneath him. "Our God's coming will be witnessed by blood. Go!" With that, the guards ran forth, shouting to others in deep voices. Millie felt a chill down her spine. Perhaps she had taken this too far. Oh God, what had she done? Kayana broke from her trance-like stance, moving in a blur to place herself between Millie and the merchant lord. "Are you hurt, Millie?" Kayana did not take her eyes from the man. Gavis had blocked the entrance, no longer looking at them. "I'm not hurt." Millie's voice quaked. She felt terror welling in her anew. "Zaxus has done well in choosing you, Millie. I am honored to have been your chosen herald. Do not fear, child. None will be remembered 100 years gone from this day, but your name will be remembered, and mine." With a dark smile, Gavis laughed. It shook from him like a physical thing. Kayana had gone wild-eyed, shifting into a defensive stance, looking at the man as if his touch could kill. "Millie, his mind has been touched by madness. If you wish it, I will remove him from our path." Gavis subsided. "As I said, you have nothing to fear. You are our God. And a God does not hide. A God commands. We leap to obey." Baring his chest, Gavis held the knife close to his skin. A look of intoxication had filmed over his eyes. "Great Zaxus, command me. Command your servant. I do not presume to know the mind of a god." Turning to Kayana, Gavis held the knife ready. "Servant of Zaxus, I am ready to wash my transgressions in blood before you." Prostrating himself, he held the knife next to his skin. Millie stood, leaden-footed. She could hear excited cries emanating from outside the great tent. The glittering point of the knife began to move across the man's chest, a line of blood forming behind it. "Stop!" Millie shouted. "Your God commands you." Immediately stopping, Gavis moved the knife from his flesh. "I follow your will, great Zaxus. Let me honor your glory." With that, Gavis stood and moved to the entranceway, throwing it open. Rows of mailed soldiers and servants stood pressing for view. Beyond the safety of their bodies stood scores of merchants, in the finely cut fabrics, brilliant white and other dyed fabrics covering their heads to keep the sun off them. A select few stood in a tight semicircle, elegant parasols gripped in their hands, or the hands of their servants, shading them as they moved. Millie shrank back into the darkened recesses of the tent, not wanting to be seen. Kayana kept her form in front of Millie, gesturing towards the rear of the tent. Faced towards the crowd, Gavis gestured for his people to behold the body of their god made flesh. "You can command them. Order them to let us pass." Kayana spoke quickly, eyes still on the demented leader who shared the tent with them. Millie stepped forward, intense misgivings overtaking her. As she approached the entrance, Gavis moved aside, prostrating himself as he did so. As she crossed the entranceway, an enormous wave of people moved to their knees, cries escaping from many of their mouths. Thousands of them waited. Even the powerful merchants themselves abased themselves. She just stood there, rippling pleas beating at her incessantly from the throng of people. "Speak, great Zaxus," Gavis intoned from behind her. Cries boomed from the crowd that spilled out in 100 directions around Millie. "Zaxus has returned! Bless us, Zaxus! Guide us!" Millie raised her arm, and like a blade slicing through the sound, it simply cut off, leaving a hushed buzz of anticipation. Looking over to Kayana, Millie nervously looked back towards the throng gathered in front of her. Kayana cocked her head and bent down before Millie, sharing the prostrated stance of the others. Millie took the cue and shifted her feet back towards the silent mob. "I have seen this day in the sands." Millie's voice gained in confidence as she addressed them. A chorus of cries of "Zaxus! Zaxus has spoken!" rejoined her words. Women in shawls near the front held their children up high into the air. Elderly wept openly, and men stood, gazes fixed on her intently. Millie thought desperately back to the mock plays she and Eddie had put on for her parents as children. Some of her favorite books told of great players, kings and queens. She could do this. Don't think, just act naturally. Millie steeled her features, arm raised high. "I have chosen this body to be my will upon this land. Stand and attend your God. I will choose my champion among you to act as my guide. If you hear me, obey, and let me walk among you."